Okay, hello everyone. My attention finds this moment with a fascination of what mysteries beyond sentience can imply. For this episode, in the subtitle I've written an inner sight to an outer world. Sorry guys, I gotta change the music. This is in the subtitle I've also written humanity's timeless endeavors. Currently, as I'm giving this talk on another, let's say, in the sideline of these Mr.Within lectures, I am working on a science fiction novel, a new one. And in this science fiction novel, I have put up the challenge to try to imagine the destiny of the human species. I guess the poetry of what the mysteries beyond sentience can imply is that we are sentient beings, we are creatures that feel what we perceive. Our biological position has led to a unique psychological position, a physiological entity through an evolutionary journey has become a subject of experience for itself. Every person alive now, every person listening even, let's say in the domain of your sentience, in the vicinity of your consciousness, one finds objects of existence. One finds the simultaneous presence of objects of existence with subjects of experience. The human condition, or the human, let's say the human eyes, they experience, they receive the sensory perception, sensory information of a physical world. But the way our intelligence processes our sensory perception is in an abstract modality. Human beings can, till the end of time, fight over is truth real or unreal, but in actuality, truth is the simultaneous awareness of both, which leads to the structure and the space where the structure is found. You see, the word human intelligence, the human part, points to the design, the geometry, the conditional. The intelligence points to an energetic truth. You see, deep down, we are energetic beings. It's just the way our energy animates in the void is making us peculiar compared to other factors in the realm. You see, as a human being, I look at lesser species, like let's say birds and squirrels, and I'm like, what are these creatures doing? It's not like I'm just saying, what are these creatures doing on my lawn? It's just. What I'm trying to get to is, what is the motivation of creatures that are just lost in a biological reality and do not have access to greater realities? If we consider the human being to be a natural being, that is inaccurate. We are not 100% a natural entity. In the sense that our physical, visible dimensions for now are biological and natural, but in the future, the nature of our psychological reality, experience of life, it's kind of like our mind, our body is in alignment with how nature happens. With nature, with the natural, but our minds are actually aligned to a consciousness that separates itself from nature. The nature of the human mind is that before, or how would I say it, embedded in the conditioning of the cultural program of civilization, it's as if when we are separate from our world, we can be something in the world. The separation, it's kind of like our minds are invisibly separating our bodies from everything else that is moving in the world. Now, the way they're invisibly doing it is in actuality an unnatural way, and the way I'm using unnatural, not in the sense that because we're a creature in nature, everything's natural. I'm saying unnatural to, let's say, the first line of code, which was a sort of genetical nature. So what I'm trying to suggest here is that our bodies are functioning in accordance to a natural technology. Our minds are functioning through an unnatural technology. If somebody says, Mr. Within, what was the first unnatural technology, or what was the first world that man stepped into? Like if right now we were considering reality was like a sort of concentric sphere of simulations, it's as if, what was the first simulation? Or the second simulation? Or in some sense, what greater worlds beyond the natural found us and the attention got absorbed? Language is an unnatural approach, because with nature it does not just come, it's the substance it's made. Something being natural is not just based on what it is, it's also based on the pace that it activates, its speed. Somehow the human intelligence can move language and subjects and have the brain simulate multiple versions of the moment faster than it can actually move in the moment. You know what it is? It's kind of like the biological, existential, actual way that it's like the way we were existing naturally was so overwhelming that the creature that we are had to, in some sense, escape into a subjective interpretation of the objects in the world. Language was a sort of unnatural, manageable reality. Language is unnatural. it's unnatural in the sense that it's initiating in accordance to a sense of self being separate from the world, and that separate sense of self has an ability to, in some sense, contrast a symbolic meaning. It's like pretty much language is allowing us to create a bridge between two dimensions, between a natural and unnatural dimension. Or I should say it differently, language is a bridge between an outer natural dimension and an inner natural dimension. It's all about the behavior of the attention that animates in the moment. You know, the other day I was thinking about my life, and I'm like, what is one thing that is ruling my life? What is one thing that is governing, or a pattern that is in some sense painting the context of meaning for me? And I realized that as much as I choose to consider I'm an unknown being, and you know, I'm like the freedom of the unknown, due to the human body being a position of shape, due to consciousness being the attention to shape, shape cannot be ignored. You see, the ancient yogis saw the world as a dream, as a sort of artificial simulation, samsara. And their strategy in ancient yoga was that you must renounce the unreal. You must let go of that which is not the actual. That is that which is not the original. I thought that this renunciation meant that you had to stop living as a physical entity. That was an error. The idea of the renunciation found its in the yogic inspiration towards moksha, enlightenment. It is in actuality a detachment from one's inner world, and it's kind of like this, that it's like this moment of awareness became intelligent. This moment, imagine like really what the person is like a sphere of space based in attention. Okay, imagine we are sight as space. This let's say this intelligence of sight as space, or the sight of space, discovered within itself an association, a central point. It's as if the headquarters of, let's say, an unknown moment of intelligence is the human physical framework. What I'm trying to say is the creature became convinced, or an unknown intelligence became convinced that it was a known body. The shape in awareness, it's kind of like double-sided. So what that means is right now, as I'm giving this talk, think of as if my consciousness and my awareness to any geometry in the moment is one side of the coin. So imagine in one side of the coin, I'm this biological entity giving a podcast in a world, right, in a physical world. But on the other side of the coin, I am actually a witnessing space. And in this space, my body correlates to all the other dimensions I see. So in some sense, our minds are using memories, which are events of self-simulation, and they are using the events of self-simulation to multiply the context of the world. And so it's like this, that it's like every memory of ourself is leading to the ability of a mind to see a different self. A part of me really thinks about the destiny of somebody who spends their life on knowledge, spends their attention on, or maybe I should say it this way, what would be the outcome of someone who pilots their attention toward knowledge? And let's say a being that pilots their attention towards the unknown, due to being a creature, just like the Buddha suggested in the Four Noble Truths, to be a temporary biological entity in a world where we cannot see its edge. What I'm trying to say is that the path of knowledge will lead human beings into becoming immortal technology. We will become robots. I'm not kidding. If we seek to live a life where known variables justify the whole moment. But if we realize that the grace in nature is that it has its own hidden pace, that sometimes in life, to grab nothing in the void is its own enlightenment. I look at what is here in the moment. I see a creature on a rock. I see a creature that its brain is instantaneously painting a meaning over the world. You know, we see the world. There's 8 billion of us, and we go out, let's say, we go through the day conducting various physical activities. I'm just trying to say, the world we see is not the world we're in, due to the mind trying to familiarize everything into a state of comfort. To live in the unknown means that you're remembering you are also unknown. To live in the known is a sort of attachment to it. It's like an absolute attachment to a shape. It's like, the person looks at reality and it's like, okay, does it make sense that I'm a creature on a rock in an edgeless changing world? Does it make sense that intelligence, the purpose of intelligence is to explore infinity? That means who put infinity into the to-do list of the soul, I'm seeing a multidimensional position, guys. I'm that human being like, okay, life is happening in multiple dimensions. The result of one dimension does not suffice. We are acting like creatures that know what's going on, but the knowledge of our world is a self-simulation. because they were afraid of the potential of their reality beyond the human framework. With our sentience comes the human desire. There's so many different kinds of people on this planet that there was a moment where I was like, man, personality cannot replace truth. There could be a huge chance that how we are being has nothing to do with what we are actually being. In other words, karma could be a sort of hoax, or it could be, in some sense, philosophically speaking, of course, karma could be a hoax, or it could be a curtain or a veil. It's as if the appearance of a creature in a world, imagine that is an ideological curtain. Over in actuality, it's as if we forgot to remember we are space-moving matter, and because we forgot to remember this, all we could do was to identify with the shapes of the moment, which was the materialistic component. Really, what physical means that you are a shape that inside another shape. That's what being a physical being means. People doubt the supernatural, not realizing it is conceptually present in a garden where the natural is. Right? That means it's as if a person can be like, does the idea of God exist? And a person can also be like, does the idea of self exist? Imagine they ask someone, do you believe in God? And the person says, I can't. And somebody says, what do you mean you can't believe in God? It's an idea, anybody can believe in it. And the person says, I can't because I don't know what the self is or who the self is. It's as if we don't know who is looking at a problem before that. It's as if we can't solve a problem if we don't know who is looking at the problem, if there is no clarity from the past. A part of me really loves the human species. Why? Because it's literally like, taking its baby steps towards interstellar, towards an interstellar acknowledgement. There's something I want to read for the viewers. There's something known as the Kardashev scale. In the Kardashev scale, there is a suggestion of 6 types of civilizations. So the Kardashev scale, I'll just read it. A type 1 civilization is capable of controlling the entire energy of its planet. A type 2 civilization is capable of controlling the entire energy of its host star and travels through the solar system. A Type 3 civilization is capable of controlling the energy at the scale of its entire host galaxy. A Type 4 civilization is capable of using energy at the scale of the universe, create galaxies, manipulate space-time. A Type 5 civilization is capable of using energy at the scale of the multiverse, travel to parallel universes, and simulate universes. And a Type 6 civilization that exists beyond time and space or in higher dimensions, creates and destroys multiverses. Exactly. A Type 6 civilization, in my school of thought, because we're all human beings, in Mr.Within talks I've spoken about it, it's that moment we reach called the advancement beyond the language threshold. It's pretty much a moment where we stop existing as a concept. So it's like civilization is advancing so fast that it becomes immeasurable. It becomes something that it becomes unshaped. That means we don't realize we are living so slow right now. Like, imagine the difference between a wagon moving, a person moving a wagon, right, in a developing country, and imagine the speed of somebody, let's say, driving the newest Ferrari in a developed country, right? So that it's like literally, it's like such a worlds apart. It's like it's like our ancestors who created the wheel never knew how fast it could go. Kardashev scale is very important because ultimately it's like it's a sort of responsibility formula, right? So think of it this way: a human being becomes responsible for their physiological dimensions, then becomes responsible for their psychological dimensions. Okay. And similarly, it's like that's what's happening in the Kardashev scale. It's pretty much the responsibility level of our species based on its greatest expansion of consciousness. You see, guys, consciousness is the closest thing we have in this world to the concept of the Force in Star Wars, You can say that just like a Jedi, like let's say lights his lightsaber, the moment we wake up in the morning, our consciousness lights the world, it illuminates it, right? We are those remarkable moments of cosmic existence, or we're that corner of the cosmos, or that place it's like we are that known place in an unknown world, where solar power is in some sense leading to abstraction development, right? Light is it's as if the light of one dimension is allowing us to generate and utilize sight in another dimension. Human beings are a transcendental converter of energy. We're literally the transcendental. We convert outer dimensions into inner dimensions, and inner dimensions into outer dimensions. Anytime the mind moves the body, the person had inspiration, right? But anytime the body, wants the mind to move, it's as if like a solid trying to be a liquid is a bit of a bizarre task, right? So this Kardashev scale is very important to remember, And something even more important to remember is, I'll just put this picture between this angel and this astronaut, and I don't know who drew this picture I'm using for this wallpaper, but it's incredible. This astronaut is dead in space, but he's not dead, Can you imagine like an astronaut, channeling angels, lost in space? The human mind is incredible. The human mind has so many backup systems to itself. You know what it is? It's like we are there's something genius about how our ancestors survived that makes me feel the destiny of the human species is a long one. We're going to reach a certain point where the way we have accepted the constitution of the human ideal will change. future, you actually get a nostalgia for it, you know. I don't know why, but it's like when I think about the future, a part of me feels like I'm already there, you know. This is really, time is literally the limit of the secular metaphysics, right? You see, it's like an atheist and theist debating. And the atheist, in some sense, being like, there's no such thing as the supernatural, get this woo-woo out of my face, you know? Like, you know, and the theist is like, man, just believe in this fictional character and you will have the ultimate salvation. And both sides of the coin are fighting, you know? One doesn't believe in truth, the other only believes in truth. Now check this out. I shouldn't say truth, but in the supernatural. But now let me tell you this, that imagine we get to a point in the future where we realize, rather than something being real and something else being unreal, in some sense what really reality and the unreal is just like we have two eyes that see the same. There is there's a subtler dimension as the mind. It's as if we are seeing, it's like a person's transcendental eyes. Imagine, you know, in esoteric circles, some people were like, you know, there's the third eye, right? And Mr.Within is going to tell you there's also a fourth eye, you know. It goes up in twos, not one, you know. So it would be like, in some sense, what I'm saying is you have access to sight. Like if you close your eyes and you imagine something or remember something or, I don't know, fathom something, you can see when your eyes are closed. Like that's the bizarreness of imagination. This is why, like, we can't ignore the reality of imagination, because when we imagine, we see something, you know, we see shape. So it's like our body is in a visible room, our mind is in an invisible room, and both of these, our sight in both of these rooms are our transcendental eyes. It's as if we are being in two dimensions in one moment, just like two different eyes seeing the same view, you know? People don't realize that the world is divided due to a cosmological primordial duality. Really, what the journey of life on a planet is that the sunlight hit the earth so many times repeatedly, right? And that temperature conditions, and in some sense, an opportunity arose for the planet to build a shield around itself. I mean, when I think about the concept of an atmosphere, it blows my mind, you know? That a planet used light, it's as if light hit a rock in an atmosphere arose. Like, what the fuck? Right? Oh, man. Someone being like, the atmosphere is an illusion. You know, I have never been impressed by conspiracy theories because reality is not physical. It's not just physical. Some part of me as a being is not satisfied. I'm not satisfied with how this species is living. There's moments where I look at my own life and I'm like, whatever way it happens, it's like it was only one individual's life. But how would the life of the species happen? That means if for this whole time we have thought that we are individual, and let's say egoic structures, egoic identities, like this whole time we've been thinking we're an intelligence that is visibly individual. But little do we know, in the ultimate context that holds all attention, we are invisibly collective, and that is what is bestowed with nature. Nature provides access to an invisible collectivity. Imagine it's nature is a technology and it allows access to invisible. Let me say it this way: nature just allows you access to an invisible collective intelligence, and it provides you access with a visible individual intelligence. Now, what is happening on the planet is we have forgotten the invisible collective intelligence of nature. We are just identifying as a visible individual natural entity, and this visible individual natural entity has started through the means of language and through the means of, you can say, transport and even cyberspace. Right? It's as if what's really the creations. That means if we look at really what did human beings create for themselves, what was the karma of the species? The karma of the species was from the chaos and the savageness of an animal that was just being defined by its environment to, in some sense, have the attention rise beyond the limitations it had accepted unconsciously. Consciousness is another way where it's another look at a world where you can decide its value. The purpose of our soul is to dance in front of the void, to dance in the, for the void. In one of these Mr.Within talks, I said that in the future, all of knowledge will turn into two schools of thought: unknownism and knownism. Poetically, or let's say culturally, this can be known as beyondism, but really what it is that the human intelligence is considering that either the unknown moving factors of the moment define the known factor, or the known factor defines the unknown. Because the origin of human consciousness is unknown, it's as if we are using the effects of the activity of consciousness to, in some sense, discover the true shape of our intelligence. But really what is happening is that human intelligence is being, or I should say consciousness is being hosted or live streamed from a dimension that is not bound to shape. Our timeless lives have been watching us before our birth could become a death, before our birth leads to death. Mysteries beyond sentience means the roar of the infinitability of the human mind. For the first time, a human being in history is saying, dare to live with an infinite vision that could never fail. Dare to live with the greatness that is dormant in your species and awaits activation. The purpose of human life is to bring forth the advanced humanity, and the purpose of the advanced humanity is to bring forth the advanced civilization, and the purpose of the advanced civilization is to be a completion of the acknowledgement of the intelligence of all dimensions. That means individual visibility acknowledged, collective visibility acknowledged, collective invisibility acknowledged, individual invisibility acknowledged. You know what it is? Being a mystic in 2022 is equivalent to like the same feeling that in World War II soldiers had in the trenches before they ran up towards chaos. You know, the chaos of the battlefield. Right now, even though it's like human beings have incredibly become way more peaceful than their savageness of their ancestors, you know, we're living at a time where, you know, most deaths are being considered as accidents, right? Which is another way of saying the intent to break has lessened compared to the intent to create. People in you know, let's say an artist, if you were an artist in India, perhaps a, you know, holy man walking in the, let's say in a village or something, would see you and look at a creative person and be like, okay, Brahman and Vishnu are assisting this individual. You know, imagine a being entered the realm, and this being was not alone, for before the mind could be a body, he was the whole cosmos. You see, it's all about freedom of mind. Minds seek freedom, bodies seek infinity. It's like the mind seeks an eternal freedom, and the body seeks an infinite continuity. It's just built into it, right? It's like our bodies, it's like when we can use, you know what it is? It's like nature is playing with its own geometry. The meaning of life is the potential of it. The future will be our greatest commander, you know. Whatever way the past has convinced you of who you are, the future belongs to eyes that are not the eyes we have now. An era of advancement will find the species. It's happening. It's like the spirit of the species is making moves, you know. There's something incredible about the unknown, because really, guys, if I was to consider what is something that my voice can, like how my voice could have a value for the world, I've wondered about that, and I have realized it is coming to my most intense and most I shouldn't say supreme, but I should say the most fascinating thing has happened. It's as if I feel my soul stepped out of the simulation of the world. Pretty much, I have met the unknown, and I have found myself in the unknown as well. So the value is really it's pretty much a mystic sharing stories of how the mind moved in ways that it's in the outer realms the species hasn't. It's all about ability unlocking, you know. the greatest humanitarian service is not to just preserve human bodies, but to usher in an era where every human being forgets the concept of being judged by the world, to realizing that they are judging the value system that gives them a meaning for the world. You are the originator of the geometry that suggests the space where the idea of you can happen. You see, there is more of a sophisticated intelligence on this planet than how much human personality has, let's say, expressed itself. Right now, let's say somebody creates a next level geometrical work of art, right? And it's like, we're like, wow, what great artwork. But in the future generations, that would be in some sense second nature. Just like how we speak a language which is let's say, literally what letters are literally geometry. Like, isn't it hilarious, right? The person's like, I gotta quickly read a book about what's going on the planet, and when they read the books, their ability to comprehend the book is limited to their ability to be capable of turning shape into an image, into an event. What really reading is building a film in your mind. This is why I'm saying, anybody who has a problem with reading, the issue is not that you're reading slow. You must read fast. You must read really fast to the point that the book becomes a film. Imagine, how fast the film goes forth. Excuse me. The definition of what we are is how the world is like a system, and we are found in this system. And while we're found in the system, it's like the strategy of a creature to survive in the world was to try to get its inner system, its own view on life as closely accurate to the actual view on life. But the bizarreness of the reality of the actual view of life is that anything we physically need to see to believe is actually an event of mind. We are never just seeing the world, we are seeing how the brain is happening, plus the world. So it's like the world is happening in a certain way. A part of us as a multidimensional being is responding to it. Like, what it is. This might be very bizarre, but there has been moments where I have tried to articulate the concept of death, and I have wondered about what could the meaning of absence be. And on some level, sure, opportunity for new life, but at the same time, it's as if, why were our eyes open to a world that was changing so we could never truly see what it is? Technically, suffering should be impossible. Imagine that somebody shouted, "I'm suffering, man, I'm suffering in this world." And imagine there was a unique scholar nearby, right? And the scholar was like, "How are you suffering?" And the person was like, "What do you mean, how am I suffering?" It's like I'm feeling discomfort, and in some sense pain, right? Like that's my suffering, right? So it's like through pain I'm experiencing suffering on earth, right? And now imagine that scholar suddenly says, right, how are you experiencing how you are experiencing pain? And eventually we'll realize it's about how our attention holds it. The nature of intelligence, as the Buddha said, is that everybody's born alone and you die alone. And everything in the middle of this journey is like a blessing and a privilege. Right? So it's as if the biggest issue of the modern world is that it thinks disregarding the value of simpler dimensions of life is like is what it means to be cool, you know? You know, we just want a great species, building a great civilization, and then getting to see how that would be like. Really, the species is piling itself behaviorally. You know, I wrote this short story called The Day the Gods Cried. And it was a very abstract short story where in it I was like, okay, all the gods are on the clouds and they choose one person, one human being, you know, to in some sense give the most complex challenges to, so it becomes an entertainment and they laugh. But little do they know in this story that the way this human being overcomes the challenges the gods throw at him, right, is so incredible that think of it this way, in a context where the gods are like, humanity, does humanity even deserve to exist? Let's test one human being. And imagine the divine brings forth the greatest obstacles, and there's one God among all the gods in heavens who laughed at humanity. Imagine there was one God. And this God chose to accompany the human being where all the other gods were, in some sense, throwing a challenge to. For the angels can't do anything other than the love for truth, you know? So this God, you know, goes and acts as a sort of spirit guide, a sort of guardian angel for this human being chosen by the lords of karma to, in some sense, be judged and go through trials and tribulations, go through a roller coaster of events. And so what ends up happening is that the gods, one by one, the demigods, they throw challenges and they laugh at this guy's, let's say, you know, anytime this guy is the karma of his moment makes him a fool. It's as if this guy goes through all the challenges set forth by the gods, and he overcomes them, and at the end of it, all the gods are crying how this human being has overcome the divine challenges, and in some sense they give this guy the let's say, upper freedom to a lower world. But what ends up happening is, the whole point of the story is, all the gods realize that with the assistance of a god, man could in some sense go through the tasks and challenges of all the gods, you know. The day the gods cried was when the gods realized their creation, it was imbued with the potential of the creator. What the soul is that you are the divine power in the room of the void. You are that which is moving. You are the conductor's stick that is being held in another dimension. You know, our minds are performances of a geometrical nature. For through, let's say, the goggles found in Plato's World of Forms. Imagine Plato's World of Form goggles, you know, imagine they sell that in the future. You know, glasses you wear where they're not covering, you know, they're not sunglasses, but what they are is they are geometrical glasses. Everything you see, its geometry illuminates with, let's say, a new neon fluorescent hue. What it is, dear viewers, is that I am trying to see if it is possible to have the human species reorganize its initial story of what the world is to that it's an unknown space of intelligence where the known variables that we identify with become us. You know, it's not just what we experience and how those memories become part of who we are, but it's at the same time, it's as if we are just a simple creature moving in a complex world. There's a sort of transcendental humility where the cosmos could not be so cruel as to give something just to take. You know, it could be that death is the ignorance of the eternal. That there has always been something more here, because before we were moving, the world was. You see, the power of the world can be personified. A person can choose to look at the whole cosmos and be like, you know, it's like there's some dude up there. You know? You know, can you imagine the person says, like, you know, there's like, I believe in a God who is sitting on a throne in the clouds. And imagine everybody looks in the sky and there's some dude in like a chair hovering in, you know, in the middle of the clouds. And, you know, people are like, God, is that you? And the person's like, yeah, it's me, guys. The mind is, you know, I think it has been conditioned through the dualistic furnace of evolution, ultimately to respond to pain and pleasure. So it's as if, why are we surviving? Because pleasure made more sense than pain. And really the logic of man is based on this, right? People don't realize, but a lot of logic is filtered by the emotion of moving towards pleasure. You know? To some degree, even though we think logic is a pure geometrical system, in some sense, new dimensions that are added change the context of meaning. It's like the person was solving a problem, and then they saw that that problem was from another problem, and it was part of a problem set. And imagine there's infinite problems to solve in an infinite world. I mean, if we really were an immortal being, we would be infinite problem solvers. You know, it's like a single letter brings immortality to the immoral, you know, like the letter T. It's all about how attention moves and how free will pilots itself. Free will pilots itself based on, in accordance to some sort of structure it has trusted. It's as if the person who hates the world or loves the world both need to review the structure of how their attention is holding identity. What is happening here is obviously more than a subject and an object, because both have been necessary for attention to function through. I keep asking myself, what are the limits of the human species? And for me, language is its limitation, biology is its limitation, cyberspace can become its limitation, its emotions can be its limitation. But in some sense, if these limitations were surpassed, what would happen? That means, where is evolution going? And where evolution is actually going, the evolution of consciousness in this universal sector. A bold claim, but one that should be said. Imperfection is experiencing itself to perfection. We are suffering as individual visible beings. The future would in some sense be a Satchit Ananda sort of joy of invisible collective being. So what I'm trying to say is that the problems that we have now, which we are defining ourselves through, are problems that are relevant to the condition of history, or the chapter of history our consciousness has entered the planet, on. So it's one of those situations where, after an individual biological experience of life has been accumulated, it's as if you cultivated individual physical existence, and then you cultivated let's say you cultivated visible individual existence. After you cultivated for some years the experiences of this, you went to cultivate invisible individual existence. You became fascinated with the mind and how the attention moves and what is really here. And let's say in the discovery of the nature of how is the self being in the world, or how is the world happening as the self, there came the realization that our individual visible life and our individual invisible life are all kept in accordance to another context. And so it's like this kind of very metaphysical idea of there being a type of invisibility that has, like, as if there's visible invisibility and invisible invisibility. Do you see what I'm saying? That's a very metaphysical idea, where the concept is being reapplied to its own limit. What must conscious agents of an unknown world do? We act in style. I want to see a better style to the human species. It's as if in the future they're like, what sort of appearance would an advanced civilization have, the closest thing to the greatest thing we could see? It's about the spirit of greatness moving through a species, and that sort of identity becoming that second nature. Imagine, whoever you are listening to me, imagine someone you love and how you feel around them. So now imagine if the whole species If children at a young age were told not to just love their species, but to serve the honor of being a creature in a very sophisticated geometrical structure. It's like physical reality has geometry, language has geometry, sound has geometry. Geometry is the soul. Or I should say, it's like the witness of geometry is the oversoul, the geometry of all ways manifestation moves. Existing in the middle of nowhere, just think about it, that whoever you are, every person right now who's alive, from the beginning of your life, you have cultivated, the experience of what it feels like to be in the middle of nowhere. A person can, build a structure with 4 walls and call it their home, right? But in reality, we are lost in the cosmos, and that's the coolest thing, right? Like something that's going to inspire many human beings to serve the idea of the advanced civilization. And when I say serve, that means every individual being the greatest. It's like the most advanced version of every human being would lead to the advanced civilization. We are reaching a time where we don't have hilariously, we don't have the time for anything that is not a win-win situation in history. For what happens, like we see it, right? Like something fascinating that capitalism has allowed is that it has allowed a very unique psychological display, a unique display of human psychology. And when I see, for example, what are billionaires doing with their lives, I see not only vision dictates purpose, but I also see that once an individual finds heaven, it spends its time, in some sense, having the collective find heaven. Once you achieve, it's like literally why teachers exist, right? Teachers exist. Why? Because they can do something. They can do something that others can't, and they stay true to the art form, and that's how they can teach it really. You know what it is? I feel that the future generations are not disconnected from their ancestors. They're not disconnected from their past lives, but they're actually disconnected from their future lives. The species does not have an efficient story yet. We try to hide the eyes of our species to truths of reality that may be dehumanized when it comes to human psychology. Like, to be honest, somebody in the chat section said geometry is sacred, and that is so true, Why is geometry sacred? Because it is the pillars of reality. It is one of the most important pillars of reality. If somebody says, how's reality being held up, right? It's as if, okay, everything has a shape, and then simultaneously there's a space for everything, and simultaneously the shapes, in some sense, on a micro level, become 3-dimensional planes where substance can have a position. Because what is a particle? It has to be something of 3-dimensional depth. Do you see? It's like based on how we define ourselves. So many human beings in the future will have ideological systems trying to, you know what it is? It's pretty much we're going to have 8 billion ways of going beyond the simulation of reality. So many ways. There's going to be so many incredible human beings that will be born, you know. So many incredible human beings are going to be born. Like, they have to, you know. You know, people are like the ancestors, you know, lived for the future, so the future could, in some sense, give them what they couldn't give themselves. You know, we must become responsible for all the dimensions of our perception. The ideological dimensions of our perception are based on time. Any moment where time doesn't exist, the human idea stops existing. Any experience of a timeless state of being, or even as Papaji, this yogi, says, sorry guys, my attention drifted. For a moment I was just thinking about what kind of human psychology we'll find in the future. And if that human psychology is not capable of considering consciousness to have a dictionary, just like, let's say, words have a dictionary where we open up the dictionary and a word means something, so the meaning of the symbol is set before we look at the symbol. What is really going to happen, how civilizations advance, is that or let me tell you this, that the greatest quality the human species has is that we are world travelers, or we are world transcenders. You know, that's the nature of consciousness. If it wasn't enough that it was a four-limbed animal, it stood up on its feet. You know, it wasn't enough that it was, a silent, moving biological entity, and it named itself. And the moment it named itself, it became something else. You see what it is? The way consciousness is functioning as us being a creature of language is in a way where the silence was not enough. And from the silence of truth, many simulations through noise appeared. The garden of existence took shape. The world had a frame. And whatever painting is on whatever wall, our eyes are tunnels. We are tunneling through all the modes of our mind, So imagine, a person getting angry. That's a mode of the mind, as if there's this intelligence and there's default settings, and from your default settings, it's as if anger comes, it's like the experience of the perception shifts. Joy comes, the experience of perception shifts. In order to have the species achieve the most incredible task, it's like pretty much we want to unlock the genius of the species, and advanced civilization is the magnum opus of the human mind, of all human minds. Bees have a beehive. Human beings have a civilization. just like a bee goes out of the beehive, accumulates experience and brings it back to the beehive, we as human beings are actually, this might sound bizarre, but it's like there's this genetical program that's moving on the surface of the earth, and the way it's collectively moving is by individualizing itself. It's as if a tree didn't grow like a stone column and the tree branched out because there was more light in the space to hold, you know? More light in the space to hold. We must not fear our humanity, and we must not fear what it becomes. You know, the spirit of an advanced civilization is not an ignorance of, let's say, the wheel of emotions, but in some sense what I'm saying is that truth could potentially not be a shape, it could be a state where everything moves through. So imagine there's some ideological systems where they're like, believe this story or get out, you know, and then there's some ideological systems who say we are here as explorers of an unknown world. It is beautiful to have an ideological purpose, but it is ugly to have that ideological purpose be ignorant of its original experience. Pretty much we are, like if there was a dictionary of human beings in the future, all the human beings that had ever existed, imagine a dictionary of human names. Like you wanted to know who Descartes was, you'd open that dictionary and you'd just read the passage, you know? That's hilarious, a dictionary of human names, and it's like endless. Human life is very important, but the issue is that the experiential, like our experience of the moment is way more advanced than how we're ideologically acknowledging ourselves in the conscious waking state, right? So it's like, I think everybody can see, like, you know, the prime reason why I'm giving these talks, because it's like the species can do something it's not doing. That's it. If right now we were in an advanced civilization, I wouldn't need to give a talk, you know. I'd be like, we're already there. You know, the purpose to shape in the void has been self-fulfilled. There's a very profound story. This is one of my favorite stories, you know, on this planet. And it's a story of Rishi Vyasa. And Rishi Vyasa can be said to be, in my eyes, he was an incredibly advanced communicator for his time. You know, he was like very close, the closest person to a time traveler in human history, right? But I'm a bit of a maverick. Sometimes I think, you know, even prophets of religions were time travelers, because the whole point of the religion was to behave differently, to behave in different to desire. Right. You know, I thought once, if my future self, imagine right now I'm giving a talk on my balcony, and I thought, okay, imagine my future self just appeared out of nowhere. It's like, how would I react? And I thought I'd be like, get out of here, man. You know, imagine my future self comes back and I'm in the middle of a podcast, and the future self has to wait until I finish my podcast. And how hilarious am I? It's like I'd be the first man in history to keep his future self waiting, you know. Really what it is that the potential of our vision is our future. And the information that we carry as knowledge is how the past has happened so far, how we have journeyed through a world which is ultimately a space where everything that has shape is in some sort of change by force. It's as if like invisible forces are moving around or pushing around the shape of the world. And really what philosophy is, we're living at a time right now where scientists look down on philosophers, and philosophers, feel scientists were, their minds were too closed to see differently, We're living at a time right now where philosophers and scientists smile and politely shake hands, but both of them are like standing in universes defined by different values. It's like people think there's been only physical wars. There's been wars between analytical philosophy and continental philosophy, and guess what? Analytical philosophy won, and I'm giving this talk. I'm being a mystic in a world that thinks the world has to be just the conviction of our visual sense, right? The mystery of our senses is so beyond that it's like there's a dimension of sound, there's a dimension of sight, right? And then there's an awareness of sound and sight simultaneously, right? Like reality is happening in such a busy, like unknown, multidimensional way, and we're just like, all right, I'll just use this name and these letters to be a personality. It's like the mask that is on our face could be our belief in a world that we never saw the depth of, Something that all religions praise is like freedom, right? If a religion was praising, study this religion and go to an inefficient place, the religion would not thrive. You see, it's the promise of the better that keeps the possibility of the potential alive, I remember in The Art of War, Lao Tzu says, and I'll get back to the Rishi Vyasa story, but I'll just follow the rhythm of my mind now, Lao Tzu says in The Art of War, as a note for the advanced civilization, I would say Lao Tzu says in The Art of War, the warrior that has won, that has seen victory before he steps onto the battlefield is victorious, right? So that means you need to be victorious before you get into the battlefield, right? This is Lao Tzu's wisdom in The Art of War. Now that victory in context to the subjective idea of what humanity is, it's as if I was like, okay, in order to have victory, we have the advanced potential for the advanced civilization. What that means is the advanced civilization is a possibility poetically in spirit form. Okay? Is a possibility in mind. Let's say it's mind, it's in a dimension of mind, but it's also being witnessed. That means the freedom, like true freedom. This is the most hilarious thing, but the biggest freedom is a freedom from having to be any idea at all, which renders one into an instantaneous presence of being. That's it. End of story. The unknown is the unknown, and truth was its own game in the void. The unknown is the power that the mind engages when it realizes it's not a shape. So most human beings, their intelligence hasn't realized they're being more than shape in the moment. They're being the space that is trusting itself for the shape to move in. So back to the story of Rishi Vyasa, why I'm considering this guy to be an ideal example of a time traveler. Rishi Vyasa is this dude in Vedic culture. My background is Persian, but something about India is it's like a glowing question mark, Rishi Vyasa, at a time where nobody even knew how to read and write, I shouldn't say nobody knew how to read and write, but at a time where reading and writing was like, you know, like a privilege, Rishi Vyasa, he's like this prince who was second in line, who decides to give up the palace and the kingdom. Pretty much, you know, I'm stalling here, but Rishi Vyasa, he's this very liberated sage, and he writes 10 books, if I remember correctly. I don't know if it's 10 or 18. I think it's 18, actually. He writes 18 books called the Puranas, and after he writes the 18 books, right, he doesn't feel satisfied. And imagine writing on giant leaves back in the day, like how much trust of a writer you need to have, you know. So this dude on leaves wrote 18 books on, like, which held stories which were suggesting the advancement of society at the time. He pretty much created something for the advancement of civilization. But then I need to start the story from a new state of mind, guys. Hold on. Rishi Vyasa, this yogi, after writing 18 books on leaves, he's not satisfied. He's not content. As if something is still missing from his soul. In the story, what happens is an angel comes to Rishi Vyasa. An angel, I think through human form, comes to Rishi Vyasa and tells him, you will not be satisfied, or your soul will not feel complete until it writes about your greatest devotion. Your greatest devotion of truth. So pretty much this guy he completes his Raja Yoga, and then his Bhakti Yoga begins. He writes the Bhagavad Gita, you know, and poetically his soul completes. As much as there are stories of failure, you know, there are stories of, you know, the contrasting success in the void. You know, who knew the human species from a life in time experience the timeless to an awareness to a parallel life? we are moving to that time and phase in history where the individual has, in some sense, found mastery with it's like we have lived as minds and bodies enough, as individual minds and bodies, to experience now a collective phase of human psychology. You know, and ideological systems, to me, they're like, they have a plus value and they have a minus value. Some ideological systems take away dimensions from reality. Some ideological systems give dimension, give a sort of freedom to reality. They add dimensions of truth. You know, can you imagine the future? You know, people are going to be like, what dimension of truth am I in? What is this? You know? You know, a faceless viewer of the angel of space, you know. Mr.Within is suggesting that the species has to stop trying to solve problems of, let's say, a caliber of one dimension, but it is now time for the agency of consciousness in this universal sector to administer itself in the most advanced way, you know. An advanced being, if somebody says how would a good and evil person be in an advanced civilization, I would say the species has advanced beyond the idea of good and evil. It's like space was singular, matter was dual. And consciousness is the central point that connects the zero dimension, the void, the singular dimension, the singularity, or let's say the singularian dimension and the void dimension, and then there's the dual dimension, the dualitarian dimension, let's call it, and the fourth dimension, it's the infinitist. Pretty much we're going to reach a level of human psychology where we are not afraid of the idea of the human being changing. We're not afraid of anything in reality because there's a force that primarily exists to understand nature. Consciousness is like an intelligent light being cast on an inanimate world, you know, an intelligent light. It's like sometimes I feel the sun is broadcasting geometrical blueprints, and anytime light allows us to access sight in front of our eyes, that sight is actually, its essence is the light. It's like the person is like, am I seeing a world or is light being in my eyes? Which one is it? You know? You know, guys, I'm gonna read something. I'm gonna go into a quote tunnel of a theme that I've never read quotes on. I've spoken more quotes on than I've read about it, but right now I'm gonna go into a quote tunnel of the idea of the word civilizations, right? So this is the quote tunnel, let's say portion of the episode. Freeman Dyson: technology is a gift of God. After the gift of life, it is perhaps the greatest of God's gifts. It is the mother of civilizations, of arts, and of sciences. Art and science in the future will be seen as like the most compassionate children of Mother Earth. Moza bint Nasser says the right to a quality education is, I believe, the perfect path to bridge the gap between different cultures and to reconcile various civilizations. Without such a right, the values of liberty, justice, and equality will have no meaning. Ignorance is by far the biggest danger and threat to humankind. No kidding. Arnold J. Toynbee says civilizations die from suicide, not by murder. He means that, like, before nature destroys us, civilizations destroy themselves. But in reality, we don't know what our civilization would do. We don't know what this civilization will do, you know? How the future is unknown is an incredible permission for the world to know itself again, to become reacquainted with the own truth of its existential experience. Vicente Fox says monuments and archaeological pieces serve as testimonies of man's greatness and establish a dialogue between civilizations, showing the extent to which human beings are linked. Incredible quote. And I have a feeling Vincent Fox's spirit animal was a animal guide was a fox, you know. Spirit guide was a fox, can you imagine? For a religious person, I think their spirit guide is God, right? But for someone who, let's say, there is something that we can call it like ideological pantheism. Anyways, back to the quote tunnel. Beverly Sills says art is the signature of civilizations. John Henrik Clarke says the role of religions in the domination and destruction of African civilizations was ruthless. Kenneth Fraser says institutions are what allow us to have continuity in civilizations. Alfred North Whitehead says civilizations can only be understood by those who are civilized. This is incredible, yeah. So an advanced civilization can only be understood by those who are advanced or as civilized in an advanced way. Can you imagine an era of advanced civility? Human beings are revaluing everything in accordance to the skill of the individual, and the skill of the individual renders the competitions in life as ones of was there effort, was there no effort. the effort of the ability of our minds is going to unite the species and bring in the momentum of an advanced civilization, where the moment the idea of the advanced enters, and if we are to consider an advanced state of being is advanced in all dimensions. So it would be as if, imagine a human being that in every fathomable, perceivable dimension of its own life was wondering about the advanced possibility of that vision. So it's as if wondering about the ultimate advancement. As a temporary creature being like, what do we have to lose if we try to do the greatest thing of them all? Because destruction, it's like is a misuse of the opportunity of evolution. We are living at a time in 2022 where everybody on the planet knows our minds are way more sophisticated than our bodies, and so it's as if the game of reality has to be pulled towards. It's as if, think of it this way, those people who were fighting battles in the outer realms, they realized they dropped their swords and shields in the outer realms, right? The warrior in the outer realms dropped his sword and shield, and then it realized there were wars going on in the inner realms. And imagine in the inner realms it dropped its sword and shield, and then it realized the nature of reality being multiple simulations of self. You see the bizarre thing of being part of the human species, like just the fact that all of us are creatures that on some core skeletal level look like each other, So it's as if, like, to be a member of a human species, to have a collective view on civilization would be it's like feeling, it's like, if clones in the future were protesting about how real they were, their argument would be in some sense that the geometry of the biological animal was cloned in every human conscious moment. So what it means is that it's like we have a sort of shape in common that can render us as one movement. In history, the mob mentality was the lesser actualization of the collective mind. The advanced mentality means the victory of all dimensions at once. That is what we're seeking. Alan Bloom says we are like ignorant shepherds living on a site where great civilizations once flourished. The shepherds play with the fragments that pop up to the surface, having no notion of the beautiful structures of which they were once a part. Guys, I was just thinking of something fascinating, that it's as if we evolved so much as a biological animal, and it's as if, what do we do? Like, what was the point of 4.5, let's say, a long period of evolution? What was the point of us evolving so long if at the end of it our attention just got fascinated by an unnatural technological reality? It's as if, what's the point of being a natural being? Why cultivate the mastery of a dimension that we step out of, Everybody deep down wonders about where sight is going, I think. It's just, I'm just saying, we have to consciously be the advancement of it. That means poetically, in the grander scheme of things, the greatest thing the human being can do is play its part. Consciousness is a mystery. An inner sight to an outer world is the mysterious way that consciousness is occurring, right? There's something so bizarre of why there should be a lantern lit in a dark cosmic forest. Existence actually doesn't make sense because it's in some sense, it's like the meaning of existence is in how it moved. The meaning of space is how it holds shape. The way to use our mind is to realize we are an unknown witness in the moment. We are an unknown presence of attention. No ideology. Imagine you are your whole moment of being. You are not just in your moment of being. I'm going to actually go and read some quotes from Papaji. Or let me read some quotes from Mooji. Mooji is Papaji's disciple, and people are like, who are these people, Mr. Within? I'll tell you, they're very they're human beings who the way they look at life is like next level. Mooji says, don't be too quick to interpret the moment, just keep quiet. My encouragement would always be, never think anything is against you. Everything is a blessing. Why should it be different? Just be quiet. Let it all work itself out. Mooji says, no thought has any power. You have power. And when you identify and believe in the thought, you give power. Believe in the thought, you give power to the thought. Mooji says, don't remind the world that it is sick and troubled. Remind it that it is beautiful and free. Mooji says, your heart is the light of this world. Don't cover it with your mind. Mooji says, some beings will walk with you for the duration of this bodily existence up to the very end. Some will come with bright promises, bright lights, but they fade quickly. Others come, they don't look like they will go very far, but they are marathon runners. They were there with you all the time. You cannot determine this. Somehow in the flow of your own unique river, you will see that everything is as it should be. That means contentment supreme. That is an access point, I would say, to an advanced state. When a person is content with being, just being. There you go. Truth never went anywhere. That's the contentment that Mooji and Papaji, these pretty much the mystical context, walks that way. Mooji says at the end of the day, you can have something in your head, something in your hand, or something in your heart. What are you choosing? Mooji says you need nothing to be happy, you need something to be sad. Mooji says, who reminds you to breathe and to beat your heart? Something is there, taking care. Mooji says, all the ups and downs are grace in different wrappings, sent to refine consciousness. Say thanks to them all. Mooji says, the greatest healing would be to wake up from what we are not. Mooji says, the greatest healing would be to stop coughing, No, he doesn't say that, but probably he would, I don't know. Mooji says, feelings by themselves do not create problems. It is rather the tendency to interpret and analyze them. When out of habit you believe those interpretations, it is there that the suffering begins. Mooji says, let the world call you lazy for not running about like a frightened ghost. Just be quiet inside yourself. Don't bother about knowing how things should be, and simply begin observing without prejudice projections or desires. Notice how life flows of its own accord. Nothing here is a chaos but a harmony. You are already inside this flow. Pretty much Muji's saying, by being conscious in the cosmos, you're like a conscious rhythm of the cosmos. We are like the music of the void, our existence. Muji says, attempting to understand consciousness with your mind is like trying to illuminate the sun with a candle. What an incredible... It's one of the most incredible quotes I've ever heard. Ever hear a quote so great you had to like post it in the chat section of your live stream? Muji says, when you can bear your own silence, you're free. Muji says, your mantra is thank you. Just keep saying thank you. Don't explain, don't complain, just say thank you. Say thank you to existence. I think Muji was talking to an ungrateful person. He's like, just say thank you, man. Yeah. You know, that's hilarious. Anyways. The moment moves on. Muji says, life is so much wiser and kinder than your mind imagines. Trust and be still. Muji says, feelings are just visitors. Let them come and go. Muji says, if you sit down and just keep quiet, you are in the state of self-awareness. Keeping quiet means being without any techniques, effort, or intention to meditate. Not following the thought stream, not pursuing the senses, no imagination. Such an intense self-focusing comes without any effort. Then, by itself, out of nowhere, wisdom and insight comes. Yeah, it's kind of like watching the moment, like a chess game where you don't make the first move. You're just waiting to see how the unknown moves, and you realize you're being it. And then a sort of instantaneous trust in one's own nature as the space of being arises. Muji says there is a presence, a silence, a stillness which is here by itself. There is no doer of it, no creator of this stillness. It is simply here in you, with you. It is the fragrance of your own self. There is nothing to do about this. It is naturally present. This fragrance of peace, this spaciousness, it is the fragrance of your own being. Muji says wanting something to make you happy is a sure way to be miserable. Muji says when you live guided by intuition rather than thought, your life dances like riding on water, fresh and untraceable. Muji says if you do not trust life to unfold, the mind takes over and it becomes a game of strategy motivated by anxiety. This mistrust is unfair. Life has given us so much and yet we do not trust it. Yeah, I mean, the whole issue is we're not trusting how advanced we can be. If we could trust the advancement of our, the potential of our advanced intelligence, then it's like bingo. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. Final remarks would be mysteries beyond sentience. It's like a curiosity beyond what we have known so far as a species, and then the idea of an inner sight to an outer world. The nature of our mind is that it's additional dimension of perception we have access to. And so humanity's timeless endeavors were at least the first one, which I could now consciously say by speaking about it, kind of I'm inputting in the collective memory, you know, collective conscious memory. But I'll say, like, it's kind of like God is the ultimate advancement, but God is inconceivable. It's like the greatness of humanity is not an emotion. It's not destined. It's not a destination for an emotional moment. It's more kind of like in the artificial paradise we found the final heaven. You know, we found the real. We found the true nature of reality before we falsely exited. Our eyes are the gateways to the future. Our conscious response to a world in the middle of nowhere is like the genius of mankind. You know, the genius of mankind in the void was to, in some sense, see all that it could be, to be fearless in all, to be fearless in all dimensions. Because the nature of the fearlessness is in the fear of space. If a person realizes their being space as simply as their being their biological body, there's like an instantaneous freedom there. You just become acquainted with the nature of how perception moves through your mind. The freedom of the future is the greatest advancement of the present. The greatest advancements of the past, you know. I shouldn't say greatest advancements of the past, but like the greatest advancement that the past could dream of. We're trying to do something, guys, that is like, it's going to cause all our ancestors poetically in their graves to start clapping for the genius of mankind. The story we tell ourselves is literally the greatness, you know. For if the greatness is defined by who you are is the world we see, you know. Who a person is their vision. And then it's kind of like, okay, I have information to define everything, redefine everything, but at the same time, it's the presence of a sight in a moment, you know. There's been times I've seen like a bird, like a sparrow, just chilling on a branch, you know. And it's been something so fascinating to me that it's like an intelligence that is content with how it's happening. The human species is like a evolutionary animal that's not comfortable being an evolutionary animal when its mind can see visions of infinitude. For truth never feared its origin. Much blessings and namaste. Rise, mankind, rise.